Welcome back to the Christian Bitcoin Podcast. We have Paul Miller, our first returning guest on the podcast.
Wow. Hello.
Welcome, Paul.
What an honor.
I'm so happy to have you back and talk about one of our favorite topics, not Bitcoin. We're going to talk about AI today.
Finally, somebody's got to do it.
Yeah. So let's jump into current state of AI in software development. What's going on?
Well, there's a bit of a war brewing. AI is very capable, and then there's a lot of predictions about how much more capable it will be. There's a lot of people making these claims like, it's going to replace all of your engineers. But those companies, making those claims are hiring engineers at like $1 million a pop, or, there's an insane, recruitment drive for like really advanced engineers. So then the worry becomes like, well, okay, it's going to be a rich get richer kind of situation where the seniors are going to use AI to like multiply their capabilities. And then there's just going to be no such thing as a junior anymore. And then there's like the reacting against this kind of bullishness and, a lot of just, pretty self-centered hype coming from, the purveyors of these tools are the haters who, for various reasons, either they don't trust AI to do a good job, or they like coding by hand, or they have some worry about like copyright. They think it's actually unethical how these AIs were trained and stuff like that. And the weird thing is I find myself most of the time like long-term aesthetically aligned with like the by hand code by hand types, if that makes sense, while also thinking that these are very powerful tools and using them a lot myself. So I think, there's this obvious tension. Like, I don't know if you saw the hot new buzz is that Linus Torvalds of Linux vibe coded something. He didn't vibe code it into the Linux kernel, but he just wanted some, I don't know, visualization tool or whatever for something he was working on. And he just vibe coded it and it seemed to work great for him. And so people are like freaking out about that, or like, DHH, the guy who created Ruby on Rails, he went on Lex Fridman podcast and was talking from kind of one of these like, hey, I like coding by hand because I like the feel of code flowing out of my fingers, and now I just was listening to him on like a podcast with a vibe coding tool, Amp Code. And he's kind of coming around to it a little bit. He's kind of seeing some of the upside and finding places where it does fit into his workflow. So I guess the middle ground is sometimes people like to use it as a learning tool, but they still like to own most of their code. But interesting, he said at his work, they had a few features that they were like either adding AI as capabilities inside of their tools or using AI for things. And those things haven't shipped. Like they like almost get them and then they're like, actually that's not good enough. We don't want to ship it. So I think it's much overstated what AI can truly ship right now. Just based on the behavior of the maximally optimistic, like the Anthropic, like we are making a tool that's going to replace all software development. And yet they're like acqui-hiring the creators of Bun. It's like, well, if it's so easy to make software now, why don't you just prompt, like make me my own, JavaScript runtime, So I realize I'm already throwing a lot of technical terms around, but it's a kind of an exciting landscape of people playing around with these things, learning, building really cool things, and yet somehow weirdly there's this wall, and it doesn't seem like I don't have a long list of things that were like, this was mostly written by AI and is a very popular piece of software that people use day to day.
So, I mean, there's a lot there. Do you still code mostly by hand?
No, I would say mostly vibe code. So for people unfamiliar, like vibe, the the timeline went from you'd write all your code by hand, and then once upon a time you got autocomplete, so it would show you little hints, and it was based on just hard and fast real things about your code that, like, oh well, this I know this function exists, so I'll offer it as a suggestion. This is pre AI times. And then GitHub Copilot came out, which uh, used AI, so this LLM technology, to hallucinate what that autocomplete could be, and it was actually really effective. So it speeds up sort of the typing. So you're still, these days you're kind of a by hand practitioner, even if you're using something like Copilot for autocomplete. And then when the AI chat bots came out, like ChatGPT especially was obviously the first big one, you would go to ChatGPT and have a conversation like, hey, I'm stuck, or I need some ideas, or I can't get this to work. What do you think I'm doing wrong? So nowadays that's kind of thought of as sort of the tutoring mode, right? It's not writing your code. But then tools came out that got AI right in the loop, right on your computer, writing the code to disk for you. And so you would just prompt it. You'd say, like, I want this feature. I want to fix this bug. It would read the code that existed, write new code, and you could review it. Or where the vibe coding came from, you just like, yeah, I'm sure that's that's good enough, and you kind of are zooming out. You're moving up the stack to more of a manager role, and you're just looking at the output. Does it work or does it not work? You'd kind of test it. And so I'm mostly in the vibe code frame when I'm trying to be very productive. And I have, all sorts of techniques for trying to keep quality up while doing that. But I wasn't that senior of a dev when this started. And I'm realizing that I still have a lot of gaps in my understanding, either because it's a new technology that I haven't really worked with, or just because I don't have a million hours as a developer making good like architecture of programs. So if I just fully vibe code something from the beginning, it very well might get to a point where either I don't understand it or it's just so complex that it kind of falls over because it was poorly architected. And so I am attempting to, like, for a while I'd do like 1 day a week where I'd like work on a side project by hand just to like keep that sharp. Or I had a recent project where I coded the whole setup for it by hand so that I had kind of like a good, clean, minimal working system before adding things with AI, so that kind of giving it sort of a safe space to work inside of. So I'm finding personally that there's so much atrophy that happens from my understanding of the problem or my ability to fix, debug things, that I need to keep on doing some manual stuff to try to stay sharp and keep improving as a developer. But I'd say like the speed of that I go when I am vibe coding is so it's so much faster than when I'm coding by hand, that I feel like most of the time when I'm doing something that has some sort of economic output, it's almost stupid not to vibe code.
It's projected out a little bit into the future. So all these big companies are only hiring senior devs. I was out in Portland a couple days ago talking to some friends, and one of them's had a daughter that just graduated with a CS degree. There's no jobs. And So, I mean, I guess.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the question is this. Once all the senior devs that are getting hired for millions of dollars a year, whatever it is, age out and retire, and there's no junior devs that have been hired in the last 10 or 20 years, there's nobody that knows how to code anymore. Does it matter? Because at that point, the AI is just so good, it can, you can just vibe everything, or are we sort of waking up into this civilization with all these grand machines that have been designed and given to us and nobody knows how to operate them?
Yeah, I think that is, well, I think it's definitely a danger of where we're at right now is that we move in that direction. I think there are a lot of reasons to not hire junior devs, and I don't think they're all AI related. There's also kind of just something about our economy's changed where people don't stay in a job very long typically. So I think it was commonly thought that when you hire a junior dev, they're going to kind of operate at a loss maybe for the first year. And then they're going to come up to speed and then be valuable. And so, if that is uneconomic, then it's just hard to hire a junior dev. I think it was already kind of hard to hire a junior dev, especially with a computer science degree, because sadly were already, pre-AI, typically teaching things that were like 5 years out of date. Or you'd come out of school and you'd never, used Git before. So like the primary workflow day to day, it's like, imagine if you'd been like learning to write all this time, but you never learned how to like save a Word doc, So it's like, you have this, it's not like these things are super hard to learn necessarily. And there's getting a computer science degree is definitely a signal of capability for learning. But it's not, that practical. So even before AI, like the dev boot camps were becoming kind of thing. But I think that's kind of fallen out of favor too, because people are realizing that they are actually kind of learning a very shallow, just the trends, the software trend of the day, which is also, not that, long-term useful. I think why I am attracted to these Luddites who still are like, like you'll take hand coding out of my cold dead fingers is that they are shipping the best stuff right now. And I think we're always going to need them. And
why?
It's because
I mean, you're kind of patting my ego here. I'm a hand coding Luddite.
Yeah. No, this is all part of my plan. What we keep on, the reason why it's a mistake not to hire a junior dev is because the idea that it's just the same way it was like a mistake that if you judged a developer's output by how many lines of code, right? You are missing out on some of the metrics of like what good work actually is, which involves intent and taste and wisdom and perseverance and creativity and ingenuity and things like that. And like what you're getting from AI it's the boilerplate. It's the thing it writes. It's very good at writing the thing that's been written a million times, except that instead of saying, calling it foo, it calls it bar. It's just like, it's rewriting it with your special names for things. And it's also good at, kind of a style transfer. So you could like say like, hey, this is written in this one programming language. I want the same thing, but written in this other programming language. That's where it's at its absolute best, when it's working with a reference, when it's working with really well-defined tests. So like acceptance criteria, like this is good if this is true, but it's terrible at coming up with that acceptance criteria. We don't have any good examples of it coming up with new, good, methodologies. We just see it being a very efficient way to apply well-known methodologies. And so I'm excited about AI generally because I think it's kind of a way, just how we realized that when we solved chess, that it turns out chess does not encompass all of what human intelligence is. Even if a computer is better than all humans at chess, it doesn't make that computer smarter than a human. And I think this is going to be a time of exploring like what parts of the human mind are different than a next token prediction, because I posit that the human mind is different than next token prediction. And so as we learn what that is, and we will learn to value the people who can do that thing, because they'll just how, you know, there was a time when it was a good skill to be called a computer. A computer was a person who did a bunch of math, right? And now we have a machine that does a bunch of math, but we still have people that make Excel spreadsheets, and people who operate the calculators in some sense for a purpose, and they provide the purpose, and they come up with the new strategies, and they vet the results. So I don't think we totally know what that is yet, but I think it's kind of going to be exciting to learn what that is.
So the vibe coder really just becomes the product manager in the end, and it provides the intent. The AI just does the grunt work. Why does the vibe coder or product manager ever have to have gotten their hands dirty with code in the first place in the future?
Because the how still matters. Because ultimately your code is run on a physical machine that, you know, generates heat, you know, and needs electricity and stuff. And so the strategizing of how to simplify things, I mean, that's a very common, you know, slop apparently was word of the year. That's very common in, it used to be a joke in programming services circles of like the enterprise style of software development. It would be just have all this extra cruft and all these different layers, and it was hard to even decipher why all of them existed, and a bunch of redundant functionality and things like that. AI does that, but even worse. Like when truly non-supervised as to the quality. So now if you have if you have great taste and you can point it at a great example of what you're trying to do, well, then then it will, you know, write it well in some sense. But if you don't have taste in actual code quality, you're signing up for a lot of unnecessary complexity, because in some sense the AI isn't really able to determine necessity or causality very well. It doesn't really have that kind of logic. It's not logical. It's vibes based. It's just like it's in some sense hallucinating you a code base, and it just has so much training on existing code bases that code base happens to compile. But there's not really causality or reason behind any specific thing unless you bring it to that. And so I think the people who have this truly low level understanding, because this is a problem with the industry even before AI, and it's been just exacerbated, is that there's a lot of people in software that don't understand what's happening and in the machine. And that's created a lot of wasteful software. There's a lot of software that we run every day that runs at like 100x or 1000x slower than it has to. If you look at what the CPU is actually capable of processing, versus what is actually what this understood complexity that we built on top of it, and then here I come as this junior dev or this, you know, sloppy vibe coder and I just stand on top of all these layers I don't understand, I'm just gonna make wasteful, buggy, unreliable software. And so people who can dive down into that stack and remove layers of complexity and truly understand what's actually happening, I think are going to have an edge. I do think that we're probably going to continue to see sort of like the celebrity coder exist, like the NBA salary for a standout developer, because you have such a force multiplier on what you do. So I do think but at the same time, there's like sort of the Jevons paradox thing, where if we're going to truly drive the cost of software development down, that actually might overall increase demand for software. It might not just mean we don't need developers because it's easier to make software. Turns out we want a lot more software. It's just different. It's custom or specific to certain use cases rather than big one size fits all SaaS tools.
So developers have been making that argument for decades. Assembly
The
code.
NBA salaries?
No, I'm talking about just the different levels of abstraction. So assembly coders are casting shade on C developers, and C developers are casting shade on Java developers, and so on and so forth. Is this time different for some reason?
The problems are that, in my opinion, and this is very much comes from like the circles of celebrity coders that I follow, right? Like this is almost an aesthetic difference sometimes, but the reliability of software correlates with the understanding of how it works, I believe. And the also the performance gains we were getting for a while outstripped the complexity we were adding. Java was invented in this time where computers were getting, so much faster, so quickly. It's not happening as much anymore. And are also kind of doing different, kinds of compute across different stacks. So yeah, in some sense, it doesn't matter if you write something in C# or, Java, or on top of 3 different frameworks in JavaScript or whatever it is. But like, how are these, LLMs working? Well, they're like hyper optimized, like actually at the chip level. Like this is work that is enabled by people who actually understand the physics of like, okay, well, we need the storage closer to the compute so that we get, more throughput. Otherwise our power bill is too high, or things like that. So we are in fact operating in many cases, and especially in the most interesting cases, at the limits of physics right now. So I think there's going to be value to that. I think both from, can you create quality software? And, Jonathan Blow and Casey Muratori are some of the, kind of the legends in this world, and talk about this a lot. And I think they do go hand in hand of, can you create quality software that just doesn't mess up in dumb ways all the time, so that so that it's not frustrating? And can you create fast, like efficient software? I think those are correlated.
So Elon thinks that the future of software is no code at all.
What is it? What does that mean?
I can't remember if it's on Joe Rogan. I'll try to find the interview and put it in the show notes, but he said something to the extent of, the future of human interaction with code and hardware devices and things is really just, the phone is a screen and it renders pixels, and the AI just figures out which pixels it needs to render for you depending on what you're doing. So it could be a movie that it's rendering pixels. It could be a checkout screen. It could be whatever. And it's not like there's necessarily any specific code behind that. It's just the AI knows what you're trying to do. And so it renders a UI to you that can make sense to a human.
I mean, I want to take it seriously. That sounds on its face really silly. I think there's an aspect of, I think we probably have too many like user interfaces these days. Like I have I like to play tennis. And so my local tennis center has a website, and I log into the website and I click to see what times are available. And then I choose a time. I collaborate with my buddies of like, does these times work for you? I send them a screenshot. So that's not even a tool that they built into the UI. I'm basically adding my own collaboration software on top of their kind of old timey, early 2000s looking website. And then I, book the time. And so that, I can imagine a world where that doesn't need its like own custom UI, right? Like I can imagine I have like some sort of AI agent that just asks the tennis center, like, hey, what times are free today? It maybe even asks it in plain English over some plain English API, and it gets back a set of times. And then my agent figures out how to render those times to me. If I want them visually, or like reads them out loud to me because I'm driving or whatever. So I could understand. I really do think that we have, in some senses, too many interfaces, and I kind of hope that we can get to a point where we actually could spend less time on our computers, because like the whole point of the computer is like you show up with an intent and a goal, and you accomplish it, or you get distracted and read Twitter, And so if we can satisfy intent without me having to click around, I think that's great. But I think where what matters is, what's the acceptance criteria, right? Like that's where the code is ultimately. Like, okay, let's say it's going to render something to my screen, right? Where I can click on it, right? Well, something we know from interaction design is that should be consistent. Like the same operation should always be on a certain side of the screen, or it needs to be big enough to be clickable. It needs the text needs to be legible. The button that I normally click should be one consistent color. So you start stacking a list of requirements that specify like correctness of whatever this output is. And you could call that not code. But I think at some point that is in some sense a form of code. And ultimately, like, code is sort of a terse way to write a concrete plan out of some vague requirements that you got either from yourself or from a manager or a customer.
Okay, let's switch topics here a little bit. It's still AI, but do you use AI just personally, not software development related, or are you going to use it if you have children? Are you going to use it in their homeschooling or anything? Or would you use it at church? Or how would you feel about somebody using it at church in different contexts for things in the church? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think I'd started. I'm working on this like epic essay of what I really think about AI, because I've been kind of frustrated with a lot of the different camps. And I listened to was it Mere Fidelity podcast? They had an AI episode, and I like didn't disagree with any of the caveats they had. Like, yeah, don't let AI write a sermon for you, right? Don't, if you reflexively ask every time you have a question, just ask AI, you might be limiting the times where you ask another human, that's reasonable. But I don't like this sort of, look at me, I found all the dark sides of using a technology. And like, I don't think that's actually very helpful. Like, we have this idea that like, how awful it is that these kids in college are using AIs to write their essays for them. But I think we should also reflect on the fact that like people are being assigned make work essays that will only be read by one person ever, and how demoralizing that is. And so I think we need to reflect on places where people are reaching for AI, and either help find ways to, learn together best practices, um, or like understand like what itch that person's scratching and try to help, maybe address like a root cause or something like that. I personally use AI a lot. Uh, a I really like Perplexity. And so this kind of blends into work because I use it because it's like an AI web search. So it's good for finding kind of up to date documentation on things. But I'll also ask it like, for how to cook something or something like that. And one of the things I really like, and most AI tools have this, is you can put your own, like you can customize basically what the system prompt is. And I'd forgot I did this. I thought Perplexity was just doing this based on my prior behavior, but I actually set the system prompt in Perplexity. There's basically like, I'm a front end developer. I like low level, simple problems to solutions. And if there's a relevant Bible verse about something that and so I'll be like, do I need to put a sauce on this? And it will say like Bible verses. It's like, well, the Bible doesn't directly address whether or not you need to add a sauce, but actually I get tons of great little like Bible verse snippets for almost everything I do. Like, even if it's like a purely technical problem, like, I'll be like about authentication. And it's like, well, the Bible doesn't directly address, web auth. It does talk about, stewardship, and it'll give me a verse about that. So I really enjoy that. I definitely feel like, and so this somewhere where I can actually relate pretty well to the diehard hand coders, is that I don't let AI write prose for me. So if I've, other than like a README of a code project, if you ever read something like on a blog from me, or a, text message or whatever, an email, that's always written by me, because I used to be a professional writer. I take a lot of pride in my specific voice, and I feel like I'm actually, good at it. And even if I'm not good at it, I value more that it's me, than the thing being done. Like, an example I like to use is like, if you had an AI write your mom, a letter every week, I'm sure your mom would love to receive. I know my mom would love to receive a letter from me, once a week. So if I automated that with AI, like, well, look at all the output I'm getting, I've achieved so much. But I know that's not really the point of that, right? Same if you get a humanoid robot to go to the gym for you, that's not the point of that. And so for writing, I kind of keep that precious. But yeah, those are a few ways I use AI. I mean, mostly it is for work, but I like to ask it questions about, like, yeah, medical stuff, searching for stuff. I'll even have it help me find, if I'm like trying to find a Bible verse. Like Perplexity can help me like track that down.
Do you think that AI, so now I'm speaking specifically about letting children loose on AI. Do you think AI is any worse or better than letting children loose on social media or just screen time in general?
Well, I mean, there's so many. It's like, is it better for your child to fall into a pit of snakes, or like a pit of spikes, or whatever? I don't know. I mean, I don't have kids, but in my opinion, you shouldn't let your child loose on like absolutely anything. Like, even like, books from the library is not like a safe, path, right? So I think that one of the big I'm very excited to have a kid. I know when I was a kid, I would ask a lot of questions and I wouldn't always get answers for them. And I didn't always have a place to go. We had like a set of physical book encyclopedias, Britannica, growing up. So I would look in there a lot. But if I didn't before I had the internet, I didn't always have a research source to answer questions. Now I think there's this kind of really exciting thing of, if your kid is interested in something, you could like build them an artifact to explore that concept, or help them build an artifact, or at some point they can build artifacts themselves and sort of explore ideas. So I think if you have a curious mind that's wise enough not to go off the deep end, it's so exciting for learning. And I think, a lot of childhood is about learning. And so I think there's so much there. I mean, obviously I'd have to game plan, if and when this day comes, exactly like how to put like safety rails on it. But I just think there's so much excitement for the opportunity to learn and build. And I think building something out of what you learn is really, a very valuable, way to learn. The thing with AI is there's twofold. And this is the danger with vibe coding. It'll do the thing for you whether you understand what it's doing or not. So you have to sort of have the self-control to realize that even though you've already accomplished the mission, or it seems like you have a sort of a fragile win because you don't know why you accomplished the mission. And so asking the AI, why did we accomplish this? Did we? And trying to actually understand it is how you can kind of cement that win going forward, both in your understanding and in the specific project, because the AI might, delete or change that part of the code next week to solve something else because it doesn't care. And if you never understood why it existed in the first place, you might not miss it. And so I think that's will be a big thing for kids with learning, is keeping them from, or helping them develop that muscle of not just taking the easy win, but going deeper. I think the other big thing, I'm developing this thing. I call it like a King Lear psychosis, where basically AI tends to be pretty a sycophant. So it likes to tell you you're right. And it gives you this kind of illusion of power, that you're like super capable. And so the King Lear story is that he is the king. He's powerful, right? And that's your position as the prompter, right? And then he delegates his power. And he doesn't realize that he's losing his power when he delegates it. And so I think you have to realize like where the power is. I think we'll actually learn a lot. One of my big theses is on this whole thing is that technology, money, and power are in a lot of ways fungible. If you have a lot of money, you can pay someone to do something for you. If you're really powerful, you can command someone to do something for you. If you have technology, you can push, start on the dishwasher or whatever. And so wisdom that applies to, how do I steward the fact that I'm in this position of leadership? I think that kind of wisdom, or like, I'm really rich and my kids are going to be rich. How do I make sure that they're not spoiled? I think that's going to apply to, my kid all of a sudden like is coming out of the womb ability to, command an army of software developers and researchers, I think, finding similar wisdom throughout history and trying to apply that to this current situation, I think it's going to be very important.
So is the only reason to use AI versus reading the encyclopedia, Google searching, reading Stack Overflow, hand coding things, is the only reason just that you're using a bigger lever on the world, and it's all about manipulating and affecting the world in the fastest and grandest possible way? Like, what's the reason to use AI versus just doing it all the old-fashioned way?
What's the reason to use the washing machine instead of washing your clothes by hand?
Yeah, I mean, in that sense, you're saying I want to free my time up. I want to get the clothes done faster, and I want to free my time up to go do this other thing over here. But in the case of AI, it's like I want to wield 1,000 developers at my command to go code something in 15 minutes to make myself rich. What's the
Why can't it just
reasoning?
be the same thing as the washing machine?
I don't know. I mean, I guess the question is what are you freeing your time up to do?
What are you freeing up your time to do when you use the washing machine?
I guess go use AI.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, I think for any labor-saving technology, we have to be careful of, I am sure, I don't know, I have not found the literature, but I'm guessing people worried what would happen to people ethically when they had technology that removed most of their, daily household chores between like the dishwasher and the washing machine and
Well,
the
okay,
Roomba.
yeah, it's interesting, right? Because it's like, okay, we've got machines that plow fields. We don't have to do that manually now. And guess what? Now we all have to go to gyms and work out.
Yes.
And so what's the mental
That's very
equivalent
much
to
the
that?
case.
When we use AI, the mental equivalent is we're all going to be idiots.
Yes. I think that's why the mental equivalent, that's why I think the hand coding, trying to stay sharp in some amount of hand coding is is valuable. I mean, this was Socrates' objections to writing, that writing would give you this sense of knowing without actually knowing because you weren't memorizing anymore. And so you'd write it down and you'd feel like you knew it, but you wouldn't actually know it. And he's actually right, And so I think the important thing with any technology is to realize that Socrates is right about writing, but also that, God, made a book. So there's also something to writing, but also, the Bible was in a lot of places and times passed down, orally primarily. So there was a lot of memorizing, and that was actually a really valuable and important part of using the Bible. And so I think that's why I'm very interested in trying to find and apply wisdom from, this technology is new, LLMs are new, but the ideas of power, you wake up one day and you happen to be a prince and you have, dozens of servants at your beck and call, like, well, you shouldn't just, this isn't for me. You don't just abdicate because there's a moral hazard here. Maybe I think for some people, if they realize there's a moral hazard that they are not going to be able to handle, I think that is actually a great reason to like remove yourself from that situation. But I don't think every prince has to abdicate. I think a prince has to realize the situation he's in and work to make the most of it.
So I think in the case of AI, it's like, depending on how you're using it, you need to figure out what workout am I going to have to do to make up for kind of taking the shortcut here.
That's how I feel personally, because it's my mind atrophies pretty quickly. And so I can learn something and then forget it very quickly if I'm not applying it. And so I think there's going to be, I think we're going to have to learn, what that workout is.
Do you think most people using AI actually think that way?
Probably not, but I think that's why this conversation is so interesting to me. And this is why I feel personally invested in it, because I feel like as Christians, if people can't look to us for, timeless wisdom, like timeless wisdom must not be very good if it can't apply to the new thing, right? So therefore, I'm going to assume that timeless wisdom applies in some way to the new thing. So I want to figure out how timeless wisdom applies to this new thing, rather than just like throwing up my hands in the air and saying like there's too many potential dangers here. My timeless wisdom can't engage with this, too spicy. I'm going to walk away for 15 years until everything, actually 5 to 10 years until it all settles down, and then I'm going to use it anyways. Like that's what kind of how I feel what happened like with social media. I feel like there's this kind of conservative tendency to sort of avoid something. Like, hey, I didn't need this growing up. When I was growing up, social media was walking down the street, knocking on your buddy's door or whatever, and so I didn't need this growing up. I don't understand how to use it or why to use it. It doesn't seem that interesting or exciting to me. But some of these young people are using this, but whatever. They're always doing their weird things. And then you wake up, 5 or 10 years later, you have a Facebook account, and Facebook is run by somebody that is not aligned with you, and it's built by people that are not aligned with you, and it was designed in a way that's not aligned with your interests. And so I feel like it should be our job as Christians that if a technology looks like it's going to exist in the world, we should figure out how to apply the timeless wisdom that we can glean from the Bible and from nature and from each other, and apply it to this new thing so that we can have some sense of mastery over it, rather than waiting for 5 or 10 years where it's just going to have that mastery anyways.
Totally agree. This is why we need a PCA study committee on this topic. I'm just going to shamelessly plug that. Hopefully
there you go.
Hopefully we'll get it done at GA this year.
I would love that.
Okay. It's your favorite topic, subtopic in this conversation. Let's talk about safety. AGI, ASI, is it possible? If so, is it going to kill us all?
No and no. We know the ending, so we know that.
Well, okay, let's talk about your eschatology then, if you're going to go there. Because you may know the ending, but other people may disagree with you.
I mean, I'm not the world's foremost expert on the Book of Revelation, but I've read it a few times, and I don't see a paperclip maximizer in there when I both when I read it literally and when I kind of fuzz my eyes and look for metaphors. So that's just where I'm at.
There is a beast. There is a mark of the beast. I think Chester's view is that AI is potentially the beast or the mark of the beast, one or the other.
Okay.
What do you think about that?
I mean, you could say the same thing about Bitcoin.
Or even like AI is, in a sense, an antichrist.
I mean, it's very hard for me to grapple with these things because I feel like it's like I don't know the end. I don't know what's
Do you
I don't know
to post mill, a mill, pre mill? Like what's your camp?
I'm bad with the names.
So post mill is like things are going to get better and then Jesus is going to come back. Pre-mill is things are going to get really bad and then Jesus is going to come back. And a-mill is kind of, things are going to kind of get better, but not all the way. And then Jesus is going to come back.
I'm probably post-mill, sometimes a little bit of a-mill, I think. I think, I actually think that the view I was like kind of raised in and grew up with, that I feel like I see in a lot of modern American church, and I feel like has been very destructive, is this idea that everything is devolving, and therefore there's no reason to think about the future, be optimistic about the future, to plan for the future, to build things. There's no reason to try to give your grandkids an inheritance because, the rapture is going to come, in a week. I think that's been a pretty destructive mindset. And in fact, I think that's why, in some sense, like it feels like the transhumanist eschatology is sort of kind of ascendant right now, because it's a plan for the future. you know it's forward looking, and it's excited about something on an indeterminate, future horizon. And so there's a motivation to work hard towards the coming of your savior, where you get to upload your brain into a vat. And so I think they're wrong, but I also and so I think anything that is where you're setting it up as your savior, or as the thing that will rival God, you're wrong in that case. So I think you're wrong to build the Tower of Babel. You aren't wrong to build all skyscrapers. I think it's a lot of it's that intent that matters when you're using these things, and to what end you're using them. All things will eventually be, work together for, the glory of God. So obviously you could be on the wrong team during that process. But I think trying to guess whether a specific technology is the mark or is the beast or something like that just seems so fraught, because it's not falsifiable. Like I don't know. Peter, I don't think Peter Thiel's the Antichrist, but like if Jesus comes back a few years from now and explains to me why Peter Thiel's the Antichrist, I'm not going to disbelieve Jesus. So like, I think we can definitely find, like, these types of things. I actually see a lot more of the type of, the mark of the beast seems to be more transactional than super intelligent AI. But I'm sure, however the mark is going to be enforced, is going to enlist all known surveillance techniques that we have, So AI, I'm sure, will be involved in operating the mark system.
Well, I generally agree with you. I'm mill, kind of optimistic, mill, maybe leaning post mill. I think things over a long story arc will get better. But even in the case of the Tower of Babel, like you brought up, there are times where the Lord smotes humanity and things take several steps backwards. It's not just one continuous trend of getting better. And so what about this idea that ASI is possible and God's going to smote us for trying to create it?
I believe personally that ASI is not possible, because I think you are creating life. And I think that was something that was, all of existence is a miracle, but it seems like life was a special extra miracle on top of that existence. And I think it's very interesting that we haven't managed to recreate life in a lab. We can look at all of the building blocks, the physical building blocks, and we can get real small with our microscopes, but it doesn't seem like we can make life. And I think we're going to find a similar limit to the mind. And that's again why I'm kind of interested in this, because I think it's actually kind of exciting to further, demonstrate, just like we learned that all of intelligence isn't chess, and all of intelligence isn't calculating math problems. We're learning that all of intelligence isn't, this sort of word association. So I really like that, because I think it's almost kind of freeing, I mean, there's a lot of things about Christianity that kind of like level the playing field for things, like, Jew or Greek or woman or female. And I think there's something about like, dumb or smart, like a lot of what we've indexed on as dumb and smart is actually going to be a little bit different going forward, because the AI will do, it's not like it's raising the floor, but it's highly specialized in a kind of intelligence, and it can augment people who might have been shorter in that kind of intelligence. But the ASI thing, a lot of that comes from the need for self-improvement. So if the AI has to become smarter than us, that implies either that we can create something smarter than us, or that that a version of it will create a version smarter than it. And I think that is actually just sort of a logical fallacy, because I think to determine whether something is better, you basically have to, oh, wow, my phone just dinged really loud. Sorry. You have to.
You think that like violates a law of physics, like entropy?
I think
things
so.
Can only get more chaotic.
Yeah, I think it goes back to that, like Elon's thing with no code. You need an acceptance criteria. So this AI is right here, and I'm proposing an AI that's smarter than that. That we have AI A, and I'm proposing a new AI B that's smarter than AI A. Well, what's my acceptance criteria for that?
How about just any force in the universe that can exert its will over you?
I don't know even what that means.
Well, it's like, if you walk out in front of a bus in traffic and it runs you over, there's a very narrow sense that you could say the bus is smarter than you. It's like the bus runs you over, you're dead, the bus keeps going. So, is it possible that we could...
Is that your acceptance criteria for smarter?
I mean,
if it runs you over or not? Because that seems like a weird...
obviously, it's more like going back to the paperclip optimizer. It's like, does the paperclip optimizer turn me into paperclips? I guess in a sense it's smarter in that it knows how to...
but that's...
Like it can use my matter better than I can stop it from using my matter.
But that seems actually a relatively easy, acceptance criteria to put on the blacklist.
What blacklist? Like a government's
I'm saying if you can verbalize the acceptance criteria without, like easy, lawyer style workarounds, I think you, in some sense, have, you've already acted as sort of the superior intelligence, outside the system, defining the, like the AI is currently...
I'm smarter than it in that sense, but not in any sense that matters, because the sense that matters to me is me not dying. like I don't know of a way to create like an AI that won't kill me.
Yeah, no, I think the thing is that all of existence is like a really good example of how, entropy wins, and that we don't accidentally get more complicated, smarter systems. So
we do in little subparts of the system, right? Like entropy can go up. Like we're taking lots of energy from the sun, and so things are getting more information and more complicated on the surface of the earth, but overall the system is going towards chaos.
Right. And how do you get that local optimization is through these sort of the acceptance criteria, the testing. So like you have this sort of self playing, Go robot, AlphaGo or AlphaZero that, plays Go against itself, and it gets better and better. And so you are determining the rules the acceptance criteria of what better means. And thankfully, certain games like Go, those are relatively easy to write down. What's really hard to write down is, what does smarter mean? Like, I understand what you're saying, that something that kills me is smarter than I wish it would be.
It's like, it's a system, it's a machine or a system that you don't understand how it works and you don't know how to turn it off.
I think in my mind, the ASI thing, you're inventing a genie. You're inventing something that is we are arriving at magically, and it's science fiction. Like it has very little relation to what exists right now. Like the technology we're actually like. Are you afraid that like the IBM?
Let's say I walked up to like a nuclear bomb that has a timer counting down, and I don't know how to turn it off. Like, is it good for me to have invented that?
How did you invent it without knowing how to turn it off?
I don't know. Like, maybe somebody else invented it. Maybe you invented it. You invented it. You put it in the room. You left. And now I'm in the room, and there's this box, and it's counting down. It's got a nuclear bomb in it. Was that a good thing? I don't know how to turn this thing off.
It sounds like I invented that myself.
Yeah, you invented it, but I'm the one dealing with it.
But it didn't happen by accident.
I mean, even in the case of the nuclear weapons, it's like they theorized about what would happen, but they didn't really know when they unleashed it, right? Like they were literally taking bets as to whether or not it was going to cause the entire atmosphere to turn, like, fissile, basically just light the entire atmosphere on fire and kill everybody. So it's like you can invent things and not really know, you can't really predict the outcome because you're not smart enough.
I agree you can't predict the outcome, but that does not mean that it is plausible or, reasonable to predict a magic superintelligence. I just think there are so many leaps of faith to get to magic superintelligence, not only at the limit of what we're capable of, but especially given what we're capable of right now.
Do you think it was silly of them to take bets on whether or not the first nuclear explosion would destroy the entire Earth?
That sounds cavalier.
It was cavalier of them to take bets on that, or it was cavalier of them to run the experiment?
Probably both. I don't know very much about I've heard that as an anecdote. I don't know too much about it. To me, it seems unlikely. If I was in their shoes and I wasn't very sure that it wouldn't destroy all of the Earth, I probably wouldn't set it off. But I'm very sure that this ASI thing is stupid.
Again, I'm not talking about like some magic genie version of the ASI that's like...
No, you are. You're asking me to pretend that several technological leaps that we can't even conceive of right now have happened, and then talk about the consequences of those several technological... How am I capable of that?
Let's separate this into two categories though. So one is like the magic genie version, where it has like somehow has moral agency and it's creative and it has a will and it shows intention. It feels like it's conscious and all these things. Let's just set that aside and let's just say I agree with you. Like maybe we can never create that because there's something special with our souls and being the image bearers of God, and this thing will never be that. And somehow those things are required. Like it's required to have a soul to be an image bearer of God, to have all those characteristics. Let's go back to the other category that you referenced, the paperclip optimizer. This thing doesn't have a soul. It doesn't have moral agency. It's just a machine that got out of control. You're saying that case is also not interesting or likely to you because you don't see it in the eschatology.
I don't see it in the eschatology, but I think maybe more practically for me, I think there's a similarity with the other case that it's implying the development of several kinds of intelligence that we have yet to develop. And so that's why I like to go back to these examples of, writing, we sort of offloaded a part of the brain, but we didn't create a super brain. Calculator, we offloaded a part of the brain, but we didn't create a super brain. IBM Chess, IBM Watson, we didn't create a super brain. AlphaGo, we didn't create a super brain. AlphaZero, we didn't create a super brain. LLMs, like with ChatGPT, we offloaded we managed to mechanically reproduce a portion or simulacrum of what the brain does without creating a super brain. And I think there are several more leaps that you would need to make to get something competent. Like you're talking about a certain level of competence that, it might not be your BFF, or might not use social engineering to accomplish its goals. You're still requiring a high level of intelligence in a lot of dimensions to successfully turn the entire planet into paperclips. And I don't think we are close to seeing that.
Do you feel like it's another way of just saying a perpetual motion machine?
That's kind of what it feels like. I think. I mean, I think it's also, it's sort of it's exactly the sort of things that the intelligent design guys talk about. This sort of idea of like specifying complexity, the idea that evolution requires this idea that you take inputs from your environment, and that you grow, somehow you evolve to becoming an eyeball, that it then evolves into a whole mammal, that then evolves into a person, and I think we as Christians know that's not true. But I think the intelligent design community shows that even without the religious argument, you can kind of show that you need enough informational input that is basically, in some sense, broader than the artifact itself to get that artifact. So you basically would need some sort of elaborate a training environment that trains specifically for the outcome of paperclip maximization. So you need something sort of, in some sense, you need a grander machine than the machine you're fearing to build the machine you're fearing.
So in that sense, you think it's several orders of magnitude away of where we're currently capable of, or it's just never possible?
I think it's never possible. I think it's, in some sense, because completing the Tower of Babel is never possible, right? Like, I do kind of feel like I have that like safety net, but I think it's actually just not possible. And I think it's not possible in a really fun way. Like, I think similar to how, it's impossible to leave the earth because the earth is flat, or it's, it's impossible to make life because that's a thing that God does. I think it's actually impossible it's impossible to make a soul because that's the thing that God does. And I think what we're going to find over time is we're going to learn more and more what parts of the brain are mechanistic versus parts of the brain that we can't produce, weirdly, surprisingly. And it will puzzle the atheist, and it will be a solace to the Christian. And that doesn't mean we won't keep learning new things about the brain. It's not we're going to hit just a black box all of a sudden. And I think that we've seen that in science. We never seem to hit a black box, but we always seem to be, there's another mystery behind the door.
I think I generally agree with you, although maybe where we're getting tripped up is the paperclip optimizer always goes on to turn the entire universe into paperclips. And maybe that's just too broad. Maybe it needs to be more like, it can run long enough to turn the entire Earth into paperclips, or maybe even the entire solar system, but then somehow entropy catches up with it and it peters out. But for our purposes, that's bad enough. Like, it's just, it's like, who cares if it does the whole universe if it does Earth?
even if it turned one city into paper clips, that would be, that would be too bad. That would be bad enough.
Yeah. So do you think
And
that
I'm not saying you
that's
can't
not
make
possible?
I'm not saying you can't make an AI weapon, but the idea of the cat's out of the bag AI that's self-directed and can't be shut down, um, it's still just reads like total sci-fi to me, and it's very hard to say anything specifically is not possible, right? But I can only really deal with. I mean, the thing uh, when I used to write for Engadget and then The Verge, we had this rule of thumb: if a company says something's about a year out, that means they pretty much figure out how to do it, and they're just like trying to figure out the branding or scaling up production or whatever. 5 years out, they like have an obstacle that they have not overcome yet, and they don't know how they'll overcome it, but they are optimistic that they will. And 10 years out, they have no clue. Like you rapidly get to the point where you just have no clue how something will happen. And so it's very hard to make accurate predictions about a technology, like what it will truly be capable of. That's why I'm kind of interested in trying to, prescribe limits. Like, I don't think self-improvement is possible. Search within a space given acceptance criteria is possible. That's how you get AlphaGo. But self-improvement, I don't think is possible. And so I'm optimistic, but I also feel like ultimately I'm never going to have the tools to purely disprove all doomer cases. That's how I feel. And so I feel like the doomers use that as this like cudgel where, well, look, you haven't logically given me a mathematical proof why my fantasy is impossible. So therefore, if you do not cower in fear about my fantasy, then you're wrong. And I find that's just, I don't know how to engage with that ultimately.
Do you think there's, as a Christian, if you think that LLMs could potentially lead to that as one of the possible outcomes, do you think it's okay to just sort of leave it in God's hands and say, well, I don't really know. I can't prove or disprove it. So I'm going to use this stuff. I'm going to figure out which workout I need to do to make up for what I'm doing. And in the end, if God needs to smote us because we're getting close to something we shouldn't be doing, he'll do that. And so not my problem. It's God's problem.
Probably a pretty fair characterization of how I feel. I mean, obviously, if you have to obey your conscience, but at the same time, I feel like I don't see a lot of evidences in the Bible of sort of feeding a outsized anxiety about the future. There's a lot of reasons to not be worried, even in the face of present injustice and violence being visited upon you. And so I think we definitely I think this is another good reason to learn how do the timeless wisdoms apply to this existing thing. And I wish we had all done a better job of that when it came to phones and social media. And I kind of hope that we can do a better job with that here. I don't envision a smote scenario, but at the same time, like, who could envision I could envision a smote scenario for America, like as it currently exists, and I feel like it was started and developed with pretty, good intentions. So I think kind of anything can devolve into smote worthiness. So I think it's very much, I mean, again, I really think, I guess another theme of the Bible I would apply to this is that it's very much on us to, God brings the increase. Like we are not really responsible for broadly for outcomes and results. We're responsible, to be faithful and to do, like to, obey our conscience, obey the word, like do what we're commanded to do and be faithful in it. And then God like handles outcomes. And so I think, being overly, it's fun to think about the future, but I think being overly anxious about it is not really recommended.
All right. Let's switch topics. This is the Christian Bitcoin podcast, so I got to bring Bitcoin in here for a second. Bitcoin is power hungry. AI is power hungry. Do you see a problem with these two things competing for power? I've kind of thought about Bitcoin as like a call option on future energy production. You're sort of securing, like, what is Bitcoin really, right? Like Bitcoin is backed by energy. So you're kind of bottling up energy now at today's prices to spend it later. And so if energy is only going to be more expensive later because AI is going to be demanding more and more of it, does that sort of just mathematically guarantee that Bitcoin is going to go to the moon, aside from, the 21 million supply schedule?
I'll probably sidestep any price prediction, but I love that AI is energy hungry because it makes more people focused on the fact that we have done an awful job in this country producing energy. And we're basically at sort of I feel like America's basically operated like at or near starvation level, like basically trying to hover right above, like just enough energy. And meanwhile, you like look at China's, trend line of how much energy, how many like nuclear power plants they're bringing online, and coal. And I think like, I really like the Alex Epstein stuff. He did Moral Case for Fossil Fuels, and he's got another book too. I forget what that's called. It's just more reasons I'm right about this or whatever. It basically, he talks about human flourishing and just how much energy, correlates with human flourishing. And so basically, cheaper energy is cheaper to do basically most things that we do in our society. And so I just want as absolutely much energy as possible. I just feel like we're totally underproducing it. And so I haven't really thought too much about if AI people need to like fight for it. And I really don't feel like prices need to go up. I'm sure they will be in the short term. But what I think really, really needs to happen is we just need so much more capacity, like easily an order of magnitude, or I would hope for 2 orders of magnitude. I think just everything in our society could become, especially, if the robot vision is going to be, happening as well. You basically need a lot of energy to turn metal into robots and then have them, make our stuff for us.
Do you believe Elon saying we're going to get Optimus this year?
I never really trust Elon on any specific timeline issues, but he seems to like eventually come out with the cool thing. So I'm sure a cool thing will happen eventually. I've been I followed robot stuff pretty closely back when I was in tech journalism, and robotics are so hard. And I think it's very interesting how they have been getting rapidly better at the same time as LLMs, although it's a lot of ways it's sort of orthogonal. Like the things that make a robot walk well, like balance. Like, we're used to be that kind of bent knee, slow walk. It's called like a zero motion point. Basically, the robot used to be, the robot had to always be fully balanced at all micro steps. And so, it could kind of pause at any time. And now how a human walks is we fall forward and catch ourselves, right? And so now robots can do that. That has nothing to do with like next word prediction and LLMs, but we just happen to be getting it. I'm guessing it probably has more to do with like the advances in drones, to be honest, than and self-driving cars, of course, than specifically LLMs. And then LLMs might be the way that we'll instruct them. Right now, it seems like the Optimus stuff is pretty much like remote control. So there's so many exciting things there. I mean, I think that ultimately I'm always kind of like, there's so much potential job disruption with all of these technologies. And I'm just kind of the guy who like, I kind of want to let it rip, because I think there's so much, the upside is so awesome, and the downside of regulating and hiding away from this innovation is it doesn't make it disappear. It just goes to China. Like that was what happened with, I think, a big problem in the US with like manufacturing is a lot of the regulations, and didn't mean the products that we use are made under those regulations. It just meant that they're made somewhere where those regulations don't exist. And so, anyways, that's kind of rambling, but I'm stoked on robots. It's fun.
Have you read Asimov's robot series?
Yes. A while ago, I found it. It was funny.
Do you remember the Naked Sun one? Where it's like there's like 20,000 people on a planet and there's like 100 million robots or something.
No.
Yeah, it's like this planet, they got super advanced. They had all these robots. Everybody had all these robots, and they just sort of, the whole human population just kind of atrophies because they don't have to do anything. The robots do everything for them, and there's like really no human interaction anymore. They only interact with each other over like virtual kind of FaceTime kind of things. So that
sounds like basically like modern day America. Like
yeah,
most skills most hard skills have atrophied. You have outside gains from just doing sort of financialized things rather than physical things. And then we all are super isolated and talk to each other through screens. No, I don't know how I missed that one.
Well, I don't know. There's like 6 or 7 in there or whatever, but and they obviously end up going on to ban robots, right? Because then it feeds into the Foundation series, and robots are not around. You read the Foundation series first, and you're kind of like, what's going on here? There's no robots. I mean, at this point, those were written in like the 50s and 60s, so I feel like I can give it away.
Spoilers are fine.
I can give it away on this podcast. The spoilers inbound, but there's one robot at the end of Foundation series that's sort of like the grand protector of humanity, and it's kind of similar to the transhumanist view of like Ray Kurzweil saying we haven't created God yet. We're gonna create God. But Asimov was writing in this time period where he was very much more thinking about it in terms of like physical, like there's actually a physical robot in this universe that is kind of humanity's God and watches over it. Whereas I think the transhumanists of today would just say, oh, everything's just going to be in a data center and on the cloud. And it has really nothing to do with like the actual physical robot that's walking around. So all that to be said, I guess I would say I'm also optimistic and kind of robot maxi at this point, just in the sense that they're kind of a thin client. Like they're walking around manipulating things in the world that are useful to us. The part that really scares me is the software running behind it on the mainframe, right? Whereas Asimov was, his whole thing with the 3 laws of robotics was like, they can't hurt humans in the real world and stuff like that, right? It was all about the physical part of it.
Well, it was, I think that was what I ended up finding silly about it, is that you had these sort of laws. I mean, that's what's been so funny about, I think, this era specifically of AI, is that a lot of our fictional AIs you'd defeat the robot by asking it to divide by 0 or something like that, or like basically give it a logic puzzle that it gets stuck on, right? And basically we kind of have this idea from computers that the AIs would be logical. And now we've ended up with our state of the art AI that is like one of the least logical things that I know of. Like it will literally write me a paragraph with like a self contradiction in it, and I'll just like spot that. It's like, what are you talking about? And so I find that really funny. So I find like the Asimov's laws of like, don't harm a human, don't let a human come to harm, otherwise do what humans say. I think those are the 3 laws.
Yeah, pretty much. There's kind of a 0 laws, like you can't, you have to protect yourself too, right? As a robot.
Yeah. Yeah. I think those make a lot of sense to try to sort of encode some of that into that ethos into our LLMs. I mean, ultimately, I would really like, I think as LLMs become sort of more democratized, I think there's a potential that we can kind of have these sort of fine tunes of LLMs that are more tuned towards like our own like philosophical bent, like, like that have read, or that highly prize like the words of Bavinck over like Reddit, I think that would be, because I think ultimately that's what that's the ethos inside of an LLM is not a logical set of rules. It's a wide database of textual associations of like what seems like what next word seems like it belongs to this sentence in this paragraph in this story. So that training data turns out to be its like ethos in some sense, and that's where a lot of its like biases come from. And a lot of it's all Reddit's fault, I feel like.
Okay,
but wait, back to the power thing though. Where are you on that? Like I'm bullish.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Saylor just mentioned he went on What Bitcoin Did, and everybody's talking about how he kind of rips Danny a new one on that one. But one of the things he said in it, in a different part of the interview, was everybody was all ESG'd up and, Bitcoin's bad for the environment and we shouldn't be using more energy until AI and all the big tech players took over. And now it's like, we're in an energy race and we need to build more nuclear power plants, and everybody's just completely swapped, on a dime now because, Mark Zuckerberg and Elon, and everybody else says that we need more energy. Right. So
is he mad about that? Cause I mean, like, I'm happy to have
he's
them.
happy about it. He's just saying it's kind of ridiculous that it took AI and the big tech companies to sort of push the narrative that Bitcoin couldn't, that coordinating all human commerce is not a big enough use case to get people to want to do that.
And I think Alex Epstein can similarly say, like, look, like, I proved with facts and logic that energy equals, human flourishing, before like Bitcoin. So like, I think there were really good reasons to have, more energy even before Bitcoin. So we just need more and more reasons. And eventually people were just going to come around to like how much better our lives can be.
Yeah. Elon did also say in an interview, this was a couple months ago, that he thinks the ultimate currency of the future is going to be energy. And I think it's an interesting thought experiment to say, is there a way to have some sort of pure version of energy as the currency? Or do you need Bitcoin as a wrapper in order to trade energy?
I can't think of a better way, because you'd have an oracle problem. You'd need somebody like on the meter, and that would just be, it also would kind of create some sort of awful surveillance system where you'd have to like track down energy all the time. Or would you have to like, I mean, I guess the thing with Bitcoin, right, is that you're burning, the energy, right? You're off gassing, you're turning it into the waste heat. And so, it'd be cool if you could just have the numbers and not have the work, but obviously Bitcoin exists because it seems like that's our best idea yet of how to be fair. I do think I heard an interesting talk from Pierre Rochard on Bitcoin mining, that mining doesn't necessarily have to go up forever. That there's, in some sense, that there's kind of a reason for mining to kind of, I forget exactly how he made the argument, but he had all these great charts and stuff like that. There's kind of almost a reason for mining to kind of stay. Basically, Bitcoin mining trends towards its cost. Right. And so unless you have if you discover a super cheap, unused source of energy, or you have a great deal on a bunch of ASICs or something like that, if you have an edge, that's where the mining can happen. And so the mining might ultimately live inside of that edge, rather than being something that just needs to continually ramp up, because it can't just continually ramp up and use energy at a loss, right? So it has to basically live inside of that margin. And so depending on how, I don't know if that was exactly his argument. That's just kind of how I'm trying to recall it. But
I guess
there's reasons for mining not to just go up forever.
I'm kind of thinking about it kind of in two different ways. One is Bitcoin is kind of taking some percentage of the energy flow of a civilization all the time. So it's kind of like you're taking kind of a vig off the cash flow, where the cash flow is the energy use of the civilization all the time. Whereas in Elon's world, I think it's more like I have a giant capacitor somewhere that's fully charged up to however many gigajoules or whatever. And I've sort of like stored this energy up, and I can deliver it to you whenever you want, if you want to actually use the energy, or I can like trade the ability to deliver that energy. But the thing is, even in that case, how do I prove to you that I actually have that capacitor charged?
Right. And then even if, like that capacitor's value to somebody depends on how close they are to that capacitor and what the transmission setup is, right? And so like a money that, gets exponentially less valuable the further away you are from the bank seems like it would be pretty hard to work with. So you would need to I have this capacitor here. You have that capacitor there. So you'll spend capacitor points over there. Like, what should we call these capacitor points? I don't know. Like, we'll need some sort of currency for this, maybe. And
I don't think it works because, like,
a currency.
Imagine the energy in the capacitor is just like gold, for example. You can use gold for things like utility value, like I'm going to use it in electronics or something like that, or I'm just going to hold it to store value. Well, like the utility value gold is, I don't know, 10, maybe 5% of its actual market value. Well, in the case of energy, the utility value is like 100%. Like the energy can always be used for anything to move stuff around that we want to happen, right? And so it's like the optimal money is the thing that has no utility value, right? So talking about energy as the best form of money when it is the thing that has 100% utility value makes no sense.
I agree that the optimal money is the thing with no utility value, but that is an innovation of the Bitcoiner Austrians. Like I think the original Austrian thesis was that you start with the value being like the utility value.
Well, that's the reason why somebody
your starting point.
Yeah, that's the reason why somebody starts collecting it in the first place, right? But it sort of asymptotically.
I would love to live in a world where we had so much energy that we just couldn't find a use for it all. And we were just like,
well, we do actually. Like 99.999% of the energy from the sun just goes back out into space. We don't use it.
It always bugs me. I really feel like I disagree with Elon on all this whole like solar and battery thing. I feel like it just keeps on never working out, and they always have these big numbers, and I just feel it seems implausible.
I think I agree with you when it comes to like terrestrial, but long term, if we're going to be like type 1, we're going to have a Dyson sphere or something.
Yes. Long term, you need a Dyson sphere or fission or fusion. What's the fusion?
The ultimate
fusion reactors.
The ultimate efficiency is, harvesting like Hawking radiation off of black holes or whatever. It's like 30%, or like that's like the
nice.
Theoretical maximum matter to energy conversion device is like a quasar or something.
Okay. That's good. I'll keep that in mind the next time I run into one of those.
So yeah, we're down here fiddling around with, metal to make capacitors and trying to harvest 0.1% of the sun's energy that hits the Earth's surface. We got to land this thing. What is your career advice to somebody that is like maybe in high school or college trying to figure out, is it worth it going to college? What are the jobs even going to look like in 3 years? I mean, you have people on moonshots like Peter Diamandis saying that there's just going to be no jobs in 3 years anyways. Like, what's your career advice?
I'd love some sort of market where I could bet against him on that. Okay. First off, I think, and I probably should have brought this up earlier, but like God commands us to work, right? God wouldn't command us to do something that was like impossible or useless, right? I think there is going to be work to be done. And so I think you want to, if you're a young person, you want to equip yourself with skills to do things that are productive for the world and for yourself. The things that people would, theoretically even maybe pay you some Bitcoin for.
What does that look like in a world full of Optimus robots?
Don't go to college. I think just don't go. It's just, I've failed. I don't know if I've convinced my brothers or any of my nieces and nephews not to go to school, but I would spend a lifetime trying to lobby my children not to go to college. I think the thing is that there's two reasons to go to college. One of them is, well, my thing needs this certification, right? Like there's a requirement. And I think most of the things that need the certification are the worst things to be part of. Like even take like medicine. I mean, I'm sorry for somebody right now who feels called to the field of medicine, but I think a lot of the field is very corrupt because you get trapped in this system that you've invested a decade becoming credentialed enough to do. And now you feel like you cannot risk the loss of your career. It's a real moral hazard becoming that credentialed because but to ever go against the grain of the accepted wisdom, you're risking losing 10 years of your life invested if you say the wrong thing or have the wrong opinion or oppose, something. So I would just highly recommend stay away from any field that requires that kind of credential. And then I think the other thing, I really feel like college, I didn't go to college, by the way, so obviously I'm biased, in the sense that I want to, affirm my own decision. But college takes people when I'm old, I'm 40 years old. Can you imagine being that old? And I have less energy than I had when I was 18 or 19 or 20 or 21 or 22. Imagine those years when you have that much energy trying to do something really great rather than practicing. And this is something I learned. I used to be a technology journalist and I reskilled it as a developer. And I got in what they call tutorial hell, where you start trying to learn how to code and you get a tutorial and it teaches you how to make a thing and you follow this guide and like, aha, now I've learned a thing. And then you try to build something real and you just completely fail. It's like, oh, well, I guess I need to do more tutorials. So you do more tutorials. And then it finally dawned on me that well, the problem is not that I haven't done enough tutorials. The problem is I haven't spent enough time just trying to actually make something. And so I think college is just this tutorial hell where you spend all this time practicing making something, but nothing that you're making matters. It's just for a grade. It's just for your professor. Rather, spend that time and that energy making things that are truly great and learning how to make them by trying to make them, but with the audience of the world or the actual economy, or people in your life, not just a professor. So there's a book called The Preparation that I've heard him on a podcast. I haven't actually read it yet, but it's kind of like an alternative curriculum where it's for guys. He's working on one for girls as well, but like after high school, you basically go and try out a bunch of things. You learn how to like drive a forklift. You like work on a farm. You get your pilot's license. You have all these experiences, and you learn how to be an EMT. You do a lot of things in the world, and there's also like a liberal arts curriculum. Like it's not like you can't be a person of letters. I think that's another reason, selfishly, I want people not to go to college, because I want people to figure out ways to make learning a thing that happens outside of college, like, finding a group to, do like an Oxford style, reading group with a professor even. Seems like a great way to learn, but I don't want to like go into generational debt for that. I'd rather just find some friends who want to study something with, and we can, work through a book together or something like that. So I want those to exist. And I think more people need to not go to college. Smart, motivated people need to not go to college to help those things exist, so that it becomes even more fun and more exciting. Because think about, if I'm imagining, I'm hoping I'm talking to someone about, like 17 right now. Imagine you look at this, time with 4 years where you don't get to be at a school with where your friends are going. You don't get to meet a friend group that you would potentially meet at a college, and you don't get that career pipeline. And think about how frustrating that is for you, right? But think about all the dummies who are dumber than you that are going to go to that college and get completely brainwashed and psyoped and dye their hair and call and have premarital sex. And college is going to ruin their life because they're not wise enough to handle it. So if you would make the sacrifice to not go to college and spend the next 4 years putting in the work to making that a marginally better experience for the next guy, then the next dummy that comes along might not feel like they have to go to college. So there are some huge trade-offs to not going to college, but I would hope that some people want to make that sacrifice to make it much more common to not go to at least a traditional university, because I think those traditional universities are awful and have done awful things to people. And people just aren't learning the cool things to learn anyways. So anyway, sorry for, I guess you asked for it.
No, it's great.
That's how I feel about college.
Believe it or not, I'm older than you. I did go to college, but I am not recommending college to my children. So I think that
Good.
it's, it had its place, but it's come a long way from, the idea of a patron, a patron, like in the 1600s, patronizing somebody to go and learn.
Yeah.
It's like it's not even, it's so far from where it came from. And I mean, not to mention the fact that the church has been completely divorced from college. Like, right? Universities were started by churches. And now it's like the exact opposite. You can send your children there to essentially become brainwashed into being part of the radical woke left, If that wasn't bad enough, then they're going to get saddled with generational debt and, have no skills and, probably just participate in all the debauchery. I mean, it's just completely perverted. So, I'm sure,
I
whatever,
would
like
love
there's
to
like
see-
some colleges or whatever, Hillsdale, maybe you can have some sort of reasonable experience or whatever, but just in general, just the idea of like, you know, I'm just like thinking about movies like Old School or something, it's like that's ultimately what people want. They want to go and kind of have the party experience and make the connections that are going to get them the white collar job that they don't really have to do much work at, that'll pay them six figures, and they can just live the American dream and buy the big house and the fancy car and like check out and watch football on Saturdays.
Yeah, and I ultimately think, I think that gets back to the AI stuff of what is our work for? Ultimately, if you feel like you're doing something that is make work, that is, you just kind of found like a cool loophole in the economy and somebody pays you to not really do anything, as nice as that feels hedonistically, it's not actually going to feel good long term. You'll want to feel like you're doing something useful. And so I think AI is going to disrupt a lot of those kinds of jobs. Probably not all of them. I think a lot of it is more of a product of money than how our money works than how our computers work. But I think there's an aspect of how our computers work where we've been doing a lot of boilerplate work, and if that, if those jobs go away and new jobs show up that require somebody with more wisdom and someone who's more interesting, basically, to do them, you want to be that more interesting person.
Yeah.
And we don't really know what that cycle, you said, like, as in a chat once, you said like you as a dev have had to reskill every, what was it, like 3-5 years?
Yeah, I was kind of on a 2 to 3 year kind of cadence for sure.
And I've felt, since I became a developer, it felt, every like 1 to 2 years, something shifted dramatically with how it did my work. And it doesn't look like that's slowing down. Like ultimately, a lot of what these AIs are about is if it's a well-defined, repeatable process with very little judgment or no judgment required, that is not going to, and it's knowledge work. It can all be done inside of a laptop. That's probably not going, that's probably going to be automated. And so you want to be at a level of abstraction above that, managing them, or a level of abstraction, below that, sort of it somehow either in the physical world or, in like the low level weeds of a problem.
All right. I think we could talk for a lot longer, but we'll have to save it for your third appearance on the podcast.
Oh, wow.
How can people...
I can,
how can people follow you?
I'm Future Paul on Twitter, and I'm also going to try to start doing some more YouTube. So you just search for my name on YouTube. You'll probably find me. And but yeah, thanks for having me. This is fun. I really want to get to the bottom of this, and I know that I am using AI in so many ways that are probably could have more wisdom applied to them. And so I really hope this conversation becomes bigger in the church, because there is a wisdom vacuum ready to be filled by true timeless truth. And so I hope we can help discover some of that going forward.
Totally agree. All right. Thanks, Paul.